Welcome to the Higher Ed Geek Podcast. I'm Dustin Ramsdell, and every week I'm having conversations with influential higher ed leaders about the work they're doing, the impact they're making, and how you too can better implement technology to support student success. Well, our conversation today is a rare treat. I honestly kind of surprised I don't have more people on to, return to the show after their initial interview, but this will be kind of a fun revisiting, sort of updating what's been happening over the past couple of years and just continuing to examine this moment for higher education, digital transformation, and looking towards the horizon for sort of all the opportunities and potential and kind of work to be done to reach kind of the goals that institutions have to better serve their students with their digital infrastructure and all that. So we will start. Sharon, if you want to give a brief introduction of yourself and background. So we did talk a few years ago, so we'll certainly point people towards that episode as well. But it's been a little while. So yeah, just give a brief introduction and then we'll get on to the rest of our conversation here.
Great. Great to be back. My name is Sharon Butler. I am the Executive Vice President at Flywire. I run the education company vertical, which is a global vertical. I have teams all over the world. And what's, I guess, interesting about me is that I was one of the founding members. So I've been on this journey for 12 years. It was just myself and a couple of people way back when. And now we serve over, just in education alone, 3,100 clients across many countries. And we're also serving 2 million plus students. And so it's been an incredible journey. And Flywire, for those of you that don't know, we're a global payments enablement software company. So essentially, we help our institutions get paid and we help their students pay with ease, if I was going to simplify it.
Yeah. I was going to try to see, is there a way that you could, just do it in a nutshell? And I think that is a perfect, succinct way to put it. Because, it's just what I love about, doing this show and talking to so many people is that there's obviously so many kind of different components that need to sort of plug into higher institutions to kind of modernize and make everything easier to use. And yeah, like you said, you're sort of serving both the institution's goals and the students' goals, and it's always a beautiful thing when you're sort of at that nexus point to make both of their lives easier and just leave them both more satisfied. So I guess, are there any, last time we spoke, the episode came out June 2020, so that was a interesting point in time in history of the world. I'm sure there's maybe some nice milestones that Flywire has achieved since then. So just any cool things that you want to mention of what's been happening at Flywire since we last spoke.
Oh my goodness. Where do we start? It's amazing. I always say to people, you never know what the future holds. One thing with Flywire, we spent a ton of time. We're so focused to listening to our clients and delivering and trying to solve to really focus on that payer experience and really focus on how we can help unlock the potential for the institution. So with that focus, we have expanded in so many ways, not only organically, but inorganically. So let's just go through the list in general. We're not just doing international payments anymore. We are also doing our full software layer where we can bill, help students plan, and help them pay. So there's an entire software layer that we can unlock our institutions that are resource constrained. We acquired a company called WPM in the UK who had basically a consulting group that had a gateway to help take payments, but we sort of saw them as a really nice fit, same culture. So we acquired them, and now we're serving, a huge percentage of the institutions in the UK and trying to help modernize them because they are going through some digital transformations over there. And then we acquired a company out in Brisbane, Australia called Cohort Go. And that was a really exciting time because we are also focused to helping institutions acquire students. And there's a really important stakeholder at play there, which is the international agents that in countries like China and India and Vietnam, families looked for help and guidance and advice on how do I send my child to a school in other countries. And so they are very, very valued in those markets, and they help shepherd students through the process of applying, getting the visas, and also figuring out what institutions to go to and all that. So that company we've acquired so we could sort of plug in higher in the value chain for the institutions to really have feet on the ground in those markets, just to kind of help better serve our clients in general. And then the main thing that was a big change is that we went public. We're now a publicly traded company. It's been 2 years. May 26th, on my son's 17th birthday, we took this company public. And as a founding member, it was sort of like an incredibly emotional time as well, because, you put a lot of you have to put a lot of yourself into a company. And I remember putting a LinkedIn post, like, it was like, I have 2 boys and I feel like this was the daughter I never had because, that's how much effort you have to put into making this happen. And honestly, working at Flywire, even as a public company, what I love most is that we are vertical experts. So I run a division that is laser focused on education, helping drive value, innovation, and really helping students. So you can see there's been a lot. There's been a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, an eventful couple of years here. And yeah, I mean, congrats on the IPO and just sort of building out sort of the whole organization there. Cause I think it's really interesting where, the financial component obviously is a big point of anxiety and worry, as students are considering their options in higher education. So if you can kind of like, on one hand, better understand those concerns, but also try to like, just kind of guide students along to get towards the institutions and not have it sort of fall apart, when they're ready to sort of make a deposit or make a payment or, set up a payment plan or whatever else it might be. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that plays out over time as sort of everything kind of starts to integrate with one another. But we're kind of talking, I guess, like certainly, it's going to be based on sort of your observations and your experience in the way that you work with institutions. But at the core of it, I feel like will be some really helpful anecdotes for other folks just navigating this moment of digital transformation that's continuing to play out. And again, in kind of a lot of different ways and different facets of institutions. But what is your perspective on, institutions updating legacy systems? Because I think we're at this point where they might have done something back in like the 90s or the early 2000s of like some sort of like digital, if it is like a payment portal or anything else, like they're updating legacy systems. It might be stuff that's like, on premise and not in the cloud or whatever else. But like your perspective on why it is important at this moment to update legacy systems and how institutions you feel like should be navigating this.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I'm actually really fortunate to work with David King, who is our CTO. And Dave is he actually, his claim to claim is he digitized the first payments platform in education. So think about the US, there was a time where you actually couldn't pay online and a lot of checks and things of that nature. And Dave created a gateway. And so we spent a lot of time talking about, what has to happen in higher education. If you think about, you mentioned 90s, 2000s, the last big trigger point was Y2K, right? That's when there was a massive redo of like looking at technology because of the pressure of this whole, hey, if we don't get it done. And so these transformation projects had to start like 3 years before the Y2K scare. And not a lot has been done since then. So what you see across the landscape is there's a lot of on-premise student information systems, right? And so when you have a legacy system that has been around for many, many years, and you've plugged it into a lot of things and leveraged it as much as you possibly can, that actually requires so much IT resource even to maintain it. And what you see is you have that converging with the fact that there isn't a lot of resource on campus right now in terms of the business offices, IT offices. So not only is it important to look at and really start to focus on the transformation from like move number one, get off the premise into the cloud, right? Because if you move the technology into the cloud, it means there's a lot less pressure on the on-premise resources like IT. And like, so you see this, and then the institution, the IT, the business people can now focus more on the problems that exist within the landscape, which is you need to focus put more investment in technology and whatnot into like, how do we attract students? How do we engage with them? And how do we retain them? And so those are sort of really, they need, if they can figure that stuff out, they can really start to add more value, right? So I talk about it a lot because one of the things about the platform that we built to serve institutions, and we have a software layer that can help institutions bill, plan, pay. And when you build something like that, and it's new, right? I think we've had it for, say, we launched it probably 6 years ago, and we've already reskinned the whole thing because that's our flexibility that we have. But when we built it, because of the knowledge of the industry, we built it to help institutions move. Like, you could lay this software layer down now and start creating these better experience for students, more flexibility and helping them figure out how to pay, and on-prem. And then when it moves to the cloud, it can still work. And we had to like think about that. And we had to put a lot more investment in that out of the gate because of the history that if you build something for this on-prem only thing right now, like and resources are tight, it's like, no, build something that can work with what they have now, but transform with them into the future. And so I feel fortunate to have Dave pre-think this whole thing. But it's because we all really see this need. Like, it just comes down to basic resources and functionality, right? And with these systems, I think 75% of institutions, someone gave me the stat, have a system that's 10 plus years old, but most of them are around 24 years old and 25 years old. So it's hard to, and you want to innovate and be flexible, because I know one of the things we wanted to talk about is accessibility. And really, accessibility really means affordability in many ways. And sometimes the most basic, hey, Dustin, I see you're having challenges. Let me help you let's have an agreement on how we can make some kind of a payment agreement, right? And every school wants to do that. But to be able to do that requires a resource, an interaction, a side note, and everything else. So it makes it really, really difficult to offer that kind of flexibility when your core system doesn't have it. So one of the things that, you asked about, accessibility and affordability, one of the best ways to help students get accessibility is to give them better ways to pay, right? So for the most part, they're borrowing, but there's other ways flexibility is really key there.
Right. Yeah. Because I think, yeah, when you're updating a legacy system, like you said, it's like you want to even have like it's just not in the equation where it's like we can't offer that flexibility and that accessibility, and everything to a student. It's just a non-starter, and just being in a place where, like you said, like the core system, which like I've come to appreciate this much more, which is why I kind of like dropped it in there in my current day job of like dealing with kind of plugging into an existing tech stack at an institution where it's like on premise or in the cloud, and why that matters and all that. So it's like, yeah, like you want you know everything to kind of play nice with each other. You want it to be flexible and dynamic and updating and all that, and just that, because it also takes less to maintain it. And if you're sort of looking for areas to kind of tighten your belt a bit, it's just like, okay, hopefully you would be in a place where you don't have to make this whole transition. Like you maybe had the foresight to start doing this work earlier. But if not, it could be an area where it's like, okay, we have to put a little effort and investment in here now, but in the long term it's going to sort of have a lot more return on investment and the explicit cost. But then there's all these other impacts of like what we're talking about, the accessibility, the affordability, and all of that. So I think I definitely wanted to spend some time talking specifically about that, the accessibility, the affordability, like how you see the work you do kind of improving and impacting in that way. Because I think, yeah, it's one important component of, getting students to be able to access higher education is making the kind of payment process and just, the business of being a student easier to navigate and everything. So yeah, if you want to just speak to that a
Yeah.
little bit.
Well, I think that there's a couple things, right? We talked about this enrollment cliff that's happening. So it's not just about accessibility, it's also about retention, right? But the tools are really the same in many ways, because you lose a student. A lot of times institutions lose students because they just missed the fact that they kind of fell behind, and they didn't have the tools to catch them before they fell, or to get them in some kind of repayment mode. So with regard to accessibility, the software layer that we built and how we went about it is because we were in education. We know that there's payment plans that exist, right? But they aren't always as flexible. A payment plan is not unique. But if I have students that are coming in and they need to figure out, like, maybe they don't want to borrow as much, maybe they need to figure out how they can stretch that payment out. And it's like our job is to enable the school to have those tools to do it, right? So that's really where I see, at least from the software layer and how it can help, is for better ways for students to pay. I'll give you a couple of examples too on how flexibility is key to even retention. It is pretty common that a student might come in and say, okay, I can afford this, and here we go. And then suddenly they get a few fees and whatnot, and then they have a balance. And because it's a system that's just has rules that said, oh, if someone has more than this on balance, don't let them enroll in their classes. But then maybe there's a note or an email or something that goes out that says, hey, you're blocked, you need to pay. Now, with this enrollment cliff coming towards institutions, like, the key business levers they have, number one is retain, right? Which, by the way, there should be better ways to do that to begin with. But any student that doesn't re-enroll, many times they're always in their mind expecting to come back. But because of the way some of the institutions operate, they don't make that easy, because you usually, then there's a rule that if there is a collection and it's past due after so much time, then it goes out to an external collection, right? And now you've got a collection company calling the student that fell behind but had always intended to go back, right? So and they also have debt. It's kind of a sad story, right, when you think about that. So as being sort of dedicated education people and having someone like Dave, sort of like, hey, how can we help an institution catch the students before they fall, and use software to see that happen, and then use software to communicate out, hey, Dustin, we see you fell behind, here's some options, and actually offer right at the gate, and take away the awkwardness and embarrassment of it all, even because usually it's like, come in the office and talk to me, and then they can accept a solution to their problem. That's one thing. And that's really, we're seeing a tremendous impact on it. And I think even in technology, that, how it actually communicates out. Sometimes things are functioning, like, oh, I'm doing a payment plan, oh, I'm sending a bill, oh, I'm sending an email to let students know this thing is happening. But because it's not really built for today, not really communicating to the students the way they're used to, like, there's just this big gap that's opening wider and wider in education, that the student today is very different from the student 25 years ago, right? And so this is where you see software companies like Flywire coming in to try to help that, solve that. So one thing about payment plans in general, though, it's the awareness that they exist, right? Some people don't even know that. They don't know it until they get their bill. And so maybe people could be planning ahead saying, hey, we don't have to borrow this much. We can afford 500 a month or 1,000 a month. And that really means we'll save this much in the long run. And then even when they are, maybe, they get into a situation, but dad or mom is getting a bonus, like, to be able to leverage software to customize something for the individual, but not put the weight on the school to manage it, is really sort of where the software innovation comes into play. that's going to really solve a lot of challenges. So to give you, and also I really good software and adding that layer, even to this legacy infrastructure that exists, is like the way to kind of have this space of a more modernized stack, right? That because this feels like no matter what ugly things are happening behind the scenes.
Well, it happened again. Prospect Paul is excited about attending your institution, but is getting constantly confused by all the information and tasks he needs to complete to enroll, creating friction and, even worse, melt. You knew this would happen again, which is why you've been flagging the need for a come-to-Jesus meeting with leadership from marketing, admissions, and IT to audit the digital experience for prospective students. Here's the problem. You're not going to convince Mark from marketing to let go of his automation software, Adriana from admissions just got set up with her new CRM, and Isabel from IT is still working through a ticket request from last Christmas. What if you could come to the table with a solution that didn't require anyone to let go of their software while at the same time ensuring a frictionless experience for prospects and current students alike? Well, my friend, guess what? Today's your lucky day. Meet Pathify, an innovative higher ed engagement hub that puts students at the center of their college journey. Pathify sits at the center of your school's digital ecosystem, being the single user experience interface tying together all systems, content, and communications. Their engagement hub elevates the information that matters most and pushes systems like the SIS behind the scenes where they belong, making it simpler for students to discover and engage with the opportunities your institution provides at every step of their higher ed journey, from prospect to alumni. What's even better, Pathify has a mobile experience that provides 100% parity with the responsive web app, so your campus app is always in sync. Pathify is a platform that every stakeholder on campus, from marketing to admissions to student affairs to IT, etc., can get equally excited about. Learn more about how Pathify is uniting strategic units across campus and bettering the entire student experience by visiting pathify.com, and be sure to tell them that Dustin from Hired Geek sent you their way. I'm seeing a lot of really kind of smart angles because it's like, these venerable institutions of higher education that have been around a long time, like, yeah, they might have this solution that they think is fine, and it may be fine. They implemented 25, 30 years ago or something, and it could be like, cool, all right, keep that. We know it'd be kind of a pain to, move on from that at this moment. How about we put that like more modern front layer, on top of your SIS or whatever else? And I think that's like a great sort of, point to kind of keep kind of hammering down on, because you kind of alluded to it earlier of like that, if you're making sort of a on-prem to cloud like transition or something, it's like if you get something that kind of provides like continuity, and then like the students don't even know maybe that something has changed behind the scenes, or they just get like hey, we're doing a little maintenance on the system and like whatever, like it's not this like seismic shift that is just sort of like disrupting everything. So like those being really good points where like just on principle for how leaders are navigating digital transformation, but then at the core of it, access is about like getting in the door, but then also kind of like staying in. I like that you kind of were alluding a little bit more to like retention, because it's like, yeah, that's not like a static thing. Like students' lives are going to change where it's like, they get a job or their parents change jobs, or, they're taking more or less credits, or they were living on and then they're living off and all that. Like that equation of how there's interfacing with, how am I going to afford my classes this semester is going to change. So they might be like, well, I needed a payment plan before, but now I don't, or now I do again, or I want to change the payment plan of like, whatever amount or something. So like, and the idea too, that it sounds like, that they can navigate this to an extent through sort of like self-service, and maybe, like do it on their phone or their tablet or whatever else, and then maybe like make a payment through Apple Pay or whatever, like any of these sort of things are all the ways that you can start to kind of like figure out how you kind of want to evolve and modernize and do all this, because there's just so many aspects to try to, like you said, like catch people, offer them options, make them aware, deliver that information in a modality that's going to be sort of engaging and actually get a response, versus just relying on like, well, you have to come into the office during business hours during the week to talk to a human being to, know what's possible. And because I'm even thinking of just like, I mean, there's dynamics of like, if institutions have like emergency funds, and like just the idea that like the institution can at least get into the mindset of like, how can we present to students you could either go on a payment plan or you could do this or that, or we do have like emergency funding to help pay that $500 fee that you forgot because it posted late or what, like, and if that's the one barrier to you persisting, we are happy to give you a one-time grant to like cover that. But it's just, they obviously, the institution knows what their options are, but you're creating that layer that allows them to deliver. Because that's something that I've started to realize is like institutions have all these support resources that sometimes are underutilized, but they're not delivering the information in a modality or on a platform that's, engaging and relevant to the students. So that's like half the battle, is like, how are you getting the information to the students?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Like there is the need, the interest, the need. It's just sort of the resource constraint or the technology constraint that can get in the way of making that happen. I mean, we have really interesting statistics. I think about Texas A&M. We went through a transformation with them, adding the software layer. Like this is why I always say do more with less. Like adding a software layer and this engagement piece reduce their inbound phone calls by and emails by about 50%. So that alone is like, okay, we can breathe now. They used to hire like 15 temps during like a certain season, right? And then you see payment plan enrollment go up by 40%. What does that tell you? Like, oh, being able to engage, create the awareness, the flexibility and the options. Well, that feels like accessibility to me, like making it easier on people. So you feel like I feel like the numbers make you feel like it is working as well. And that's simply just automation. Is that it? That's it. It's automation that is game changing. So it's really about, I don't know, I guess making the wish list of everything you would like to do to help a student and figuring out like, well, how can you do that by waiting for your big transformation to happen in the background? Now, the systems that are out there, PeopleSoft, Illusion Banner, and Workday, and I remember Workday coming into the market, it's like, whoa, it's cloud. But now your PeopleSofts and your banners have cloud based solutions too. So, maybe even that approach isn't so scary. But at the same time, I think it's really about really starting to invest in trying to help not just domestic students, but international students have that better experience. And some people might say, this is just payments, right? Who cares? But that's the big payments are the big, how do you get the student in the seat and how, to afford it? How do you attract a students even from other countries? And then once they're in there, how are you going to keep them? And unless you want to keep investing in lots and lots of people doing things, it's which isn't scalable and no one has the money for it. The institutions really do have to look at transforming how they operate. And I really believe software adds the value and the automation that can be game changing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, efficiency is definitely going to be the name of the game for institutions, because I think, with like pandemic era related funding and just a competitive marketplace and everything, like it's just going to be, you have to be efficient and still providing high quality experiences for students and everything. And I like too that you kind of mentioned about like if a student like stops out and they have this intention to return, like you'd want to sort of be able to make that, their transition back to the institution as easy as possible. Because I remember working with students as a coach, like that was a very common reason why a student would stop out, and was the barrier to that. Like they earnestly, like you said, like they'll stop out with the intention of coming back. And then when they earnestly are like, cool, I'm ready to go, it was just this like, kind of antiquated payment platform and like limited options in terms of being able to at least just sort of have a window of opportunity to register. Then it's like, okay, it's a real thing. I'm going to be back in class as of, next semester. It's not this sort of theoretical, well, I do want to go back. I don't know when, how, and whatever. So all those sort of things, because I think they're important aspects of, you're sort of teeing me up perfectly for the next question here of like, yeah, like we're entering into a period of time, a, very complex, increasingly international and competitive marketplace for institutions. So you do have to be able to show your value and be able to, because you could market all day long and you get a lot of interested students who are applying and all that sort of thing. But then again, it would either fall apart when they're trying to navigate the payment process or better understand the actual cost and, plan for that and all those sort of things. So I guess just as you're looking ahead to the future, like what do you see on the horizon for institutions as they're navigating this complex international competitive
Uh,
marketplace?
I believe that institutions need to start thinking more about engagement with students that are already on campus, or even, thinking about once they do all that hard work to land them, how are they going to keep them engaged? And just even checking these boxes of like, make sure we have some flexibility with regard to payments, because life changes, right? And so really at least put a lens to that. And although there's meetings, look at your technology. And with regard to international students, I mean, it's very competitive out there for students now. I mean, I have the view of the globe. And so you have, international students coming from, the three key markets are China, India, and Vietnam. But we also start to see institutions, they need to start to diversify a little bit more on their recruitment strategies. And also the competitive nature of international students. They go to lots of international students go to Canada now, UK, Australia, is you need to be, typically we haven't looked at the international student as offering any flexibility to them. But now we have to start thinking that way as well. So it would be like, oh, they're great, they pay in full, and they're good, they're really good for it. But it's time to also look at that population, make sure they're getting as good of experience as your students, and that means flexible options. And also, I know the one big thing that we solve is I talk about software, but also be able to have the conversation as well. And, or even just be able to someone to answer a phone or receive an email during their business hours, right? Like serving the family is very difficult for an institution. They don't speak all the different languages, particularly when you need to communicate with the family. So being able to have that kind of service, that when someone's writing a big check for $50,000, $60,000, sometimes they just need be able to talk to someone. And so we invest so much money in that, which obviously, that's a big investment for a company. But we realize it's so important because there's just no one there on campus. So hopefully we get to a point where software is so great, no one has a question. But a lot of times there's still questions that happen. And it's just something for institutions to think about, right? Better experience for students.
Yeah, I mean, that sort of supplementary kind of, offering or service or sort of support that you're mentioning, I think is like really awesome, because it is that idea where it's like, again, okay, institution, like you can still operate more or less like how you have been to maybe more serve like your time zone, at least in your like local area and those sort of things. Like, but let it like, if this is an area that you want to pursue, then we can sort of help be kind of supplement to that. But it definitely like makes me think a lot, where I just keep sort of beating the drum and sort of shouting from the mountaintops of like institutions having to think in kind of a digital first mindset. Because obviously, like if they were solely doing what they were doing before and being like, yeah, I'm sure we could just recruit, international students. And it's like, there's so many dynamics, even going to just that sort of like you said, like hopefully we know everything is pretty clear and all that. Like you still need to be able to kind of reassure people. Like it is just like it's a big investment, it's a big emotional decision about like going to college and all that. So it's like, how are we going to be available to those people who may be halfway around the world in their time zone and their language and different things like that. So like, that you can just try to leverage things to sort of supplement what you're doing. And yeah, so it's just a really important for institutions. And again, that digital first mindset would have applications certainly in this sort of international student engagement, recruitment, and support and everything. But it's kind of a day-to-day mindset of just how you're making decisions about the investments that you're making as an institution and your kind of infrastructure and systems and all this good stuff. So we will end, though, as we always do, give you the floor for a final thought, call to action, wrapping everything up as folks are finishing up this episode here. Yeah, just what do you want to share about our conversation today?
Yeah, I've been a great opportunity to talk about this stuff. I feel like even with your wrapping up on some of the stuff we said, it's like all of the technology, all of the innovation, all of the stuff that's available today, and even the stuff we focus on. At the end of the day, it's about a better student experience, right? Like that's what, this is what families are paying for. They want a great experience. They want a great education experience. And institutions, I think sometimes the investment, the work that has to happen for change, it can seem overwhelming. But I feel like if the North Star is really what is that experience for the student that you're trying to serve, I feel like if we keep that at top of mind when these transformation or investment conversations happen, then I think it's a really good place to keep their eye on in order to like think about how should they change and what should they invest in.
Right. Because I think, when they were maybe making that decision 30 years ago, they were kind of thinking about like, what do we need to serve our needs and to sort of just, whatever. So it's like, and you're going to know that that's going to be just sort of, the reflex of sort of like, okay, what's my job like? What's going to help make my job easier? So it is that idea of like putting in that intentional effort and energy and maybe solicit the feedback, get focused, whatever it has to be to keep, the student experience top of mind from a prospect all the way through to when they graduate and everything. Because it's
What's the journey, right? What's the student journey and what's the experience in the journey? And if you're doing that, then you're going to be very focused. You're going to be plugged into your ability to attract them and to retain them, right? So I think that feels to me like the right thing to focus on.
Absolutely. Well, that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Sharon, for hanging out and sharing all that you did. And we'll have ways to connect with you and Flywire so folks can see more of what you all are up to. But just, appreciate you so much and all the great work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you, Dustin. Great times. Talk to you later.
Hey, all, Zach here from Enrollify. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, admissions, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks that are all designed to empower you to become a better higher ed professional. Our shows feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Mickey Baines, Jeremy Tiers, Jaime Hunt, Corinne Myers, Jamie Gleason, and many, many more. You can learn more about the Enrollify Podcast Network at podcasts.enrollify.org. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea. Find yours at podcasts.enrollify.org.